Hello and welcome to another episode of Raise the Bar. I'm your host, Troy Haynes, former UCLA high jumper, career best of 2 meters 22, 7'3" and a half or a quarter, depending on who you're talking to. I like to round up to a half. Um, I just recently met someone who had the same PR and he claimed 7'3" and a quarter. And I was like, oh man. Anyway, that's got me at number 4 on the all-time list at UCLA. And really doesn't mean anything to most people, but been holding on to that spot for 30 something years now, however long it's been. Seemed like 40 years. When did I finish jumping? It's been almost 40 years, 1986. So it's crazy. There's been a lot of good jumpers that have gone there in the meanwhile. Just nobody's gotten over that one in particular while they've still been at UCLA. But now, my career was over a long time ago, and I've been coaching for a while. So we're getting up to the kind of the sticking point here of the high school season. My college season is now over. I coach at Vanguard University. Excuse me, this is my fourth year with Vanguard, and their season ended 2 weekends ago with their conference championship, the first one at the D2 level. So that was fun. Got to watch my boy Zach go up and compete, and then bumped into one of my old jumpers. He's not an old jumper, but he worked with me a few years back, Malachi Carrasco from Fresno Pacific, who ended up winning and jumping pretty high. He jumped 211 this season already, so he's getting ready to break the 7 foot barrier. So that was fun, but that kind of ended the college stuff for me. So now the focus is back on the high school kids, and we had this last week 9 league champs spread out, here in the southern section of CIF, all over divisions 1, 2, 3, and 4, with a few seconds and thirds and 1/4 even that got a qualifying mark. And so we have maybe it's 10 league champs, something like that. But they're all competing this weekend, 4 different venues. I'm going to be at one running the high jump, so I won't get to see some of them. So I'm hoping that they're well prepared by me. They should be, and that they will make it through CIF prelims to the finals. I have high hopes for all of them. And then at CIF finals, they will uh, take the cream off the top of all 4 levels of CIF. And the rumor is that they're going to go up to 18 this year. Nobody's quite sure. I'm calling up the CIF divisional office to see if that is indeed the case. I know it's going to happen in the races. Not sure about field events yet, but everybody keeps telling me it should, which I like because that means a lot of jumpers are going to be able to stay alive longer. And it's kind of a crapshoot. Who's going to jump high on a given day. So the state qualifying mark at the Masters meet is 6'6". To get in, I'm sure it's going to be 6'4", with no misses. There's a lot of guys jumping 6'6". Now, not all of them will, recreate that under pressure, but there's an awful lot of 6'6" and higher jumpers here in the Southland. So it'd be great, to see a bunch of them get in. If there's the 4 winners plus another 14, that's a lot. And, you know, 6'6", 6'4s, maybe a 6'2" with no misses. I don't know. We'll see. But yeah, that's the plan there. Get through the Masters meet. If you jump 6'6" at the Masters meet, no matter what place you finish in, if there's 18 people there and they all jump 6'6", they will all go to state. I've been down that road before. Back in 2019, we had Jack Wiseman from Huntington Beach and Aiden Garnett from Edison, both of them kind of Huntington Beach. And they both went to the state meet that year along with Kyle Jenkins. And they all jumped 6'4". The height was lower that year. So there was 12 guys, which is the old number that I'm used to, at CIF finals that qualified for the Masters, and 11 of the 12 made 6'4". So they sent 11 guys. The number used to be 6. Then they created that, the automatic qualifier just in case it was a really deep year. Lots of times here in the Southland, there's people that don't get to go. And when you go up to the north, no offense to the north, but they might not be quite as deep. as us down here. It could be weather dependent. There's a lot of really great high jumpers that came from up north. I jumped against them in high school. I know there's a lot of them. And, from Malachi Carrasco up there in Fresno on up, there's a lot of guys up north. A lot of good high jumpers have come out of there, but it's not always quite as deep. There'll be some really high end guys, but maybe not as deep. So some of the guys that get to state from up there might jump only 6 feet or something like that. So, they don't really have a shot when they get to CIF, state meet. You're just going to get wiped out along the way because somebody's always going to jump 6'10" or 7, to win. So something like that, 6'11" one year, 6'10", you know. So anyway, we're looking forward to that. And what I want to do this particular episode is break into our first ever mailbag. So we've got to ask the Sky High and Fly guy. If you want to get your questions answered in the email bag, send us an email, skyhighandfly@gmail.com. You can do that. You can also send me a direct DM on the Instagram at Sky High and Fly Jump Lab. Either one of those would work, and we'll be happy to get to your questions. So the first question I pulled was, how can I get better when my team doesn't have a high jump coach? Talk about where I live. This is one of the reasons why this business got started, and kind of why I got started coaching. A lot of jumpers kind of get found out by accident. One of the things I have not been able to do in all my times of coaching, all these years, I've really tried, and I've only been a head coach once or twice, and didn't really stick because I'm not much of an administrator. But I'm like an idea guy, and my idea is, let's see what everybody on the team can do, and it's a stolen idea. When I was at Millikan High School back in the 80s, the early 80s, 82 was my senior year, so 80, 81, 82. We held a decathlon every year. I don't know what the gals did at that time. We didn't practice together. Everything was kind of separated still. And so we just held a decathlon every year, and we did it by grade. So, and we only had a 3-year school, so it was 10th, 11th, and 12th grade my first 2 years. So I competed in the decathlon my, sophomore year, and we tried just about everything. And they called it the decathlon. I don't think we did everything, and we might not have got to all 10, but I know we did high jump, long jump. I know we didn't throw the javelin. Can't do that here in California at the high school level. So that's one for sure. I'm pretty sure we tried the pole vault because that was where I first got exposed to the pole vault, was Millikan High School. The pits were out, the poles were out, nobody coaching it, but it sure looked like fun, and it really is. If you ever get the chance. Oh my gosh, I almost gave up high jumping for pole vaulting. That's how much fun it is. So but we did the sprints, the hurdles, high, long, pole vault. So there's the three that are always in the deck. We did throw the shot. I know we did not throw the disc. So that's one that's out. So it was in name only decathlon, but we did a lot of the events, and everybody competed, like everybody that was going to be on the team. And it was kind of a point of pride. Like, I think might have been a little bit more literate about track and field than kids are now, especially with the history, especially here in the United States, because the decathlon used to be dominated by the U.S. We had great decathletes forever, right up until Bruce Jenner, and then we obviously had the Dan and Dave, and we've had a couple since. But I mean, we really used to dominate, and it's not the same anymore, not the way it was. But so anyway, we would do that, and it was real competitive. And the advantage that I figured out, the reasons that our coaches did it, was instead of getting a bunch of people that come out for track, and now some of us had been doing track and field. I did track and field in 8th and 9th grade in junior high, and they had actually pretty organized things. We didn't have anybody teaching us how to high jump, but we had meets, and those were fun. And so you had been doing stuff already. I remember running in some relays, a slow white guy like me, running relays was pretty funny. But I tried long jump and high jump and stuff like that, even in junior high. So, you came into high school sometimes with a little bit of experience. Most of the time now, my experience in high school, and it depends on where you're at. Some people have a decent, I would call it the grassroots, of the feeder schools coming into their high school may actually have some of that stuff. We don't at Garden Grove High School where I work. If we do, it's well hidden, but so you would come in with some previous experience, and then, but even then, the coaches still really don't know what you can do. You might say, "Hey, I want to go out for sprints." I get this all the time when I was at Garden Grove. Be like, "Hey, I want to go out for sprints," and you say, "Okay." You line them up and you watch them sprint. You're like, I think you're a distance guy, or I think you're a shot putter, or whatever. And then some guys are like, oh yeah, you're definitely a sprinter. So, the one thing that having everybody do the decathlon would have done for you is once you see the results, you kind of already know, what people can do. And if you're watching as a coach when you're running it, I'm obviously going to be watching for there might be somebody who can jump pretty high but has terrible technique, and I might be like, maybe there'll be a better long jumper or triple jumper or something else. And then other times, maybe I just say, yeah, come on over. We'll start training you in a high jump too. But it seems to me it's a very simple way. And like I said, I didn't create that idea, but I definitely stole it from what my high school coaches have done. And even though I've got many head coaches that nod and go, yeah, great idea, nobody's ever done it, even though I keep trying to get them to do it. So, instead you spend the whole season sometimes finding out what people can do. So kid tries sprints, sprint coach kind of shuffles them towards the back because they're not very fast. They're getting the last of the reps and blah, blah, blah. And then it's like, after a couple meets, running fourth and fifth heat, not really fast. It's like, why don't you go try something else? Try one of the jumps, or go try the shot put or go do the distances. You're not very fast. Maybe you've got endurance. So yeah, you just it takes a long time. And then sometimes right before the end of the season, sometimes at league finals, somebody will throw somebody in there. Hey, you look tall. Why don't you go try the high jump? And boing, they go over stuff. Or like my cellmate at Garden Grove, I call him Mark Hastings. He's the defensive coordinator on the football team there. He said when I jumped 5'3" earlier this year at the Masters meet that I went to, he said, "Congratulations on being the tallest one in your class, because you run up if you're tall. You don't have to jump very high, and you can just kind of fall over the bar." So sometimes the tall ones just have that advantage, and maybe they got a little bounce, and they run up and they jump over something. They don't know what they're doing, but they can get over stuff. And so many times just this week, I've had at least one, maybe two parents come to me and say, my kid just got exposed to this, and what do you know? They've got some talent. They jumped 4.8 and they won their league 4.10. You're like, okay. And they're like, they want to help them in 1 week, right? No pressure. I got one day to work with a new client and get her ready for CI prelims on Saturday. We're going to train tomorrow, so we'll see how good I am. But you know, getting them ready, based on one workout, and but parents are just looking, and the trade secret is there are no high jump coaches out there. So, how can you get better? The recommendation from me would be, now probably is better than it used to be. There are high jump coaches that are private, like myself. I'm not a club. I've never really wanted to be a club. It takes too much organization. Like I said, I'd rather just set up times and say I'm going to be at a certain place and train. I have a lot of my own little things that I need to do drills and stuff like that. I really need a pit. So, we do that and, just say, hey, I'm here for 3 hours, show up and, do what you want, warm up, come on over and we'll start working. And so there's that. That's my version. There are clubs that you can go to, track clubs. The problem there is many times you're going to have one guy who's savvy enough to run the club, businessman enough, maybe he's got a track background, and just sees a way to make some money, gets your monthly fee coming in, right? And and can handle a bunch of kids at one time. Maybe he's got a couple of coaches or people that volunteer to help him or whatever, and they can handle 30 kids at once and say, hey, let's set up some drills and you guys all do this together, blah, blah, blah. Once you start running multiple kids, high numbers of kids, you need a certain number of coaches. I think there's certain laws they have, how many you have to watch a certain bit. And you go that route. And like I said, you're kind of in the same boat. You don't really know if they know anything about the high jump. And I'm here to tell you 9 times out of 10, they probably don't. Or if they do, they're too busy doing everything else to particularly help your kid. So my vote there is no, come to me. No, my vote there is, how do you deal with that? I've been in that situation myself at various times throughout my career, with or without a coach. And a lot of kids have been in that. That's why, the kids will watch YouTube videos, right? And they look at stuff online and they're trying to decipher. Some people I think are maybe a little bit better wired for that than others, just to be able to watch video and pick stuff out of it. Some people really don't do it very well at all. They are what I would call field jumpers. If you show them stuff, it's funny. I learned this being a teacher. There are completely different learning styles and how people get stuff. I was a visual. I see it, you show it to me. I can generally kind of start copying it pretty quickly and modify and continue to improve on what it looks like. Man, there are some people that even as you're explaining it to them, they're just looking around. They're not really paying attention to you. They're listening. It's funny because you'll accuse them that they're not paying attention. They are, but they're only hearing you. They're not watching you because it's not an important cue to them. They're used to listening. So, there's all kinds of those. And then you've got kinesthetic people that, yeah, they watch you, but they want to do it right away. They watch you do it and they're like, I'm going to do it. And I think the visuals that have a little bit of that kinesthetic stuff are kind of dangerous, especially if they like jumping, because then they'll wear themselves out, take too many jumps. But anyway, so you can quite literally become your own coach. It's dangerous simply because there's a lot of things you need to have a coach tell you. Um, you know, Taking off too close to the bar, for instance, hitting the standard with your head, jumping out of the pit. How do you avoid these things? If you don't know any better and you're just like, I'm just going to keep working, I had some success, blah, blah, blah. You're bound to make those mistakes. I hit one of the standards with my head my first year at UCLA, and I'd been jumping since I was 12. And I did that when I was 19. So after 7 years, I managed to hit a standard with my head, which I'd never done before. And I have not done since. That was a one timer. Landing on the bar because you're too close to it, you knock it off on the way up and land on it. Nobody likes that. And there are ways to avoid it. I try to teach people it, when I first start working with them. But it'll still get some people jumping out of the pit because you decide not to pull the trigger where you should and take two more steps. So you're going down the bar and you jump out of the wrong end. There's lots of little things like that. And then sometimes the first habits, I call it imprinting, like a duckling. Sometimes those old adages as far as learning technique are true. Sometimes it's old habits die hard. You've heard that. I'm here to tell you that is very true. Somebody's been doing something the same way for a long time, you are going to have trouble getting them to do something else. You either need to completely change, like make it so different that there's no frame of reference so that they can't just go right back to what they've been doing. An example would be completely changing arm styles. Maybe if they were used to be a double armor, boom, maybe you change them to a single and hope that they can just like completely ditch the one for the other. So I'm here to tell you that adage is definitely true many, many times. Old habits are hard to break. Same kind of thing, right? It's really difficult. You have to spend a lot of time, a lot of reps, be patient, do a lot of walkthroughs, a lot of run-throughs. A lot of times, man, it's just like it's almost like you can watch it. It starts to try to change, and then the brain will shift it back and get back to where it was before. It's like this is what we do. This is how we do this. And for a young kid without a coach, how did they get over the first bar they did? Well, they drove their knee up and they fling their head back and they got over. And what happens then? Hey, good job. High five. right? If you're a guy and a cute girl says, "Hey, good job," you're like, "Oh, great, thanks." And you're like, "Oh, wow, I'm gonna make sure I do that again." You get positive reinforcement, right? You get success. If you have success doing something, you can repeat it. Why wouldn't you? Unless there's somebody there going, you know what? This is going to work for a while. And then when you got to some decent heights, which look way higher than what you're at now, and you might think you're jumping really high, but compared to others, no, but you're not going to say that to someone, right? But you just go, later on, this is going to cause trouble for you. So I'm going to try to nip this in the bud right here. But I tell you what, man, if they start doing it and they have success doing it, they're going to keep doing that. And it's going to be harder for you to get rid of. Um, I do it, I still get that with kids when they come to me the first time, any client. Um, I had a one jumper from Chico State this year come down for the summer. And, we really started working on one thing in particular. And man, just it's like pulling teeth sometimes. Like, I want to get you farther away from the bar. I want you to plant your foot at the back right corner of the pit with your left foot. I want you to do this. And time after time, man, got foot plant to parallel and right on top of the bar. And I mean, this is a tremendous talent too. And there those problems I've got a lot of experience dealing with. And unfortunately we just had, a 9 week summer. So I got a chance to do some work. And then, what happens? The athlete goes back to a situation where they don't have a coach that they trust. And those old habits, man, they're hard to get rid of. They'll come back. So, yeah, it's pretty amazing. So the original question before I wandered off track, which those of you that know me, it's the way that usually goes, was how can I get better when my team doesn't have a high jump coach? And, you know, um, it's definitely tough. I would say if you're a parent or you're a young, jumper in the area here in the Southern California area, you can always, try the Google search, find someone and see if they're, hitting on any cylinders with you. Here we offer video analysis, we offer, in-person training, training programs that include sprinting and plyometrics and joint stability and, all the stuff that I was trained to use on myself first. So, again, answering this question, this has been a lifetime long quest with me was, how do I get better? And again, with and without coaches sometimes. And so, I experimented on myself, and now you know why it's Skyhiandfly Jump Lab, because I don't know, we're just trying stuff out and see what sticks, and this is, geez, I started coaching in 1988, 89. 89 was my first year out of UCLA that I started coaching. So, it's been what, 11 and 25, 36 years. And there's been a lot of experimentation and modification and, so on. So if you can find someone like that you trust, there are some good coaches out there. They do advertise. I don't have a list for you. They're competitors, obviously, but there are sometimes people ask me, I'm way over here and they're 3 hours farther away from me or something. And they said, do you know anybody in the area? So if, they're down in Vista Murrieta, I'd be like, hey, why don't you look up, James Kiefer? He used to coach Doug Nordquist and was, worked down to Vista Murrieta. And he does, I would think maybe he still does some private work. He's retired from being the head coach there, but, I know he still works with some athletes. So sometimes, situations like that come up. So it's not an easy, quick answer on that one. Sorry to say on that, but great question. Here's another. This is something that's been coming up. How do the NCAA roster limits affect my chances of jumping at a D1 or D2 school? My first thought when I heard this was kind of a little bit of a panic once they said they're going to be 45 on a team. When I was at UCLA, we had like 65 or 70 guys, as I remember. It didn't really matter. You could carry as many as you want because you only had so many scholarships to go around. I think there was 8 at the time. So very few people even had full scholarships. When I finally got on scholarship after 2 years in jumping 7.2, I was just given a partial scholarship, which was books and tuition, which you'd be surprised how little that was back in the day. It's way more expensive now. But wasn't a whole lot, and when I got there, there were 7 jumpers on the jump depth chart. I was number 7. So that was just high jumpers. And there's a lot of events out there, so it could get pretty deep in a pretty large team. But a lot of the guys were just going to school there and competing on the team as quote unquote walk-ons or non-scholarship athletes, or if they had a scholarship, it was a partial like mine and it was tiny. So, you'd kind of spread the wealth around. I don't know what's going to happen now with NIL and all that. What does NIL mean to a track team, right? Track doesn't make any money, not like football or basketball. So I don't think you're going to see track athletes getting paid big amounts of money. And even people that claim that they're professional now, you and I both know there's not a lot of money to be made in track and field. You have to be very, very good, world class in your particular event. And even if you're world class in the jumps, high jump, long jump, triple jump, pole vault, even, man, unless you're breaking records like Mondo or something like that, you're probably still not getting much money. They give most of the money to the sprinters, whatever. So, the money is not the issue. And what I heard first was, well, isn't this going to cause all these D1 schools to try to get their athletes to be more like multis, right? They want them to do more than one event, which would make sense if I had less people, right? I'm not going to be able to have specialists. But then, when I thought about that, maybe that's still true. Maybe somebody's going to do that. But when you think about the roster cuts, right? There's going to be athletes that used to be at D1 programs that are no longer going to be welcome. We're going to say, well, we don't have enough room for you. Sorry. Are those guys going to disappear? I don't think so. The transfer portal is real. It extends to all sports. So, if you were a 6'8" or a 6'10" high jumper, let's say, you're a 22 or 23-foot long jumper that can't quite crack in at Division One. There's a lot of Division Two schools out there that would snap you right up. I guarantee it. If you've got one 6'4" high jumper at your D2 and somebody's floating around as a 6'8" or a 6'10", and a lot of schools now are saying, these big schools are saying, well, if you're not a 7-footer, you're not a state champ, you're not this, you're not that, we're not even interested. They want somebody who can step right in and score points at the conference meet and blah, 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 right? And because I've got a limited amount of spots here, and I don't want to waste a spot on somebody who's not going to produce for me. But how many of those are there? How many 7-footers are there walking around high school right now? I only know one for sure because I've worked with him and his dad, and that's Jordan Randolph, and he's a junior. So he's still not even available. I don't know if he's pulled the trigger yet on where he's going. We've been talking about Grand Valley State in Michigan. Coach Jones and his guys there. He's got a whole troop of them, including Eli Kosiba, who jumped 230 already this year. 3 of them went to the trials, right, just last year. So, man, there's a lot of great schools out there with good young talent. But there's just then there are always going to be a few. It's a big country. We got 50 states. There's going to be some 7-footers. But think of all the big D1 schools there are. There's not going to be one per school. So what now? You don't get a 7-footer. You don't get a state champion. What are you going to do? You're going to say no high jumpers? I'm not going to take a 6'10" guy because he's not good enough. One of the other guys I just did a podcast with, Kirsten Wicks, from McKendree University. He was jumping 6'7" in high school. And all of a sudden at this D2 school, he's flourishing and jumping, he's jumped 214, I think, almost a 5-inch improvement. So, you're going to get kids that mature later on. There are going to be kids that jump 6'10", 7 feet and never jump any higher. And you go, well, why is that, Skyhiandfly guy? Why does that happen? But, some guys are 6'3" and 165 pounds in high school, and they get into college, they put on 20 pounds. And you go, what is the big difference there? It's like 20 pounds is a lot more weight to carry up and over something. When you're playing basketball and you just jump up and hit the rim, maybe it doesn't affect you as much. But when you got to flip around in the air and land on your back, it does. I'm just here to tell you. From 6'3", 180 in high school to 6'3", 195, I had to learn how to change a bunch of things fast because I wasn't getting off the ground like I was in high school. And I've heard that story more than a few times. So, it depends. Some guys can make the adjustment. Jumpman Westner, he was on at the trials back in 2021 and jumped 7'5", and routinely on his Instagram site shows himself dunking from behind the free throw line. Amazing pop. And he likes being at 205. But most high jumpers are going to be, skinnier, you look at Barshim, you look at the perfect body type, you look at Tamberry, you look at Brandon Stark, you look at some of these guys, they look really stick thin and fast and not, wiry strong. They're not like wimpy looking, but they're definitely built to catch air, as I call it, instead of, looking like a linebacker or something, right? Um, so the jury's out, but I think there's going to be places for everybody to go still. And if you don't get to a D1 school that you were looking at, maybe there's another one. I mean, there's all kinds of D1 schools. There's majors, there's mid majors, right? Just like Steph Curry went to, what was it, Davidson? Um, you know, Nobody'd heard of them until he got them to the NC2A, whatever they made it, Sweet 16, or, made it to the Elite Eight or however they went, right? Everybody knew him after that because he was jacking up threes from all over the place. But nobody knew about Davidson before that. So I think, if these guys get cut off of these teams because the NC2A and all their infinite wisdom decided to put roster cuts on a non-money sport. Sorry, the NC2A. Are they cutting the football scholarships? No. Are they cutting basketball scholarships? No. Why would you? Those are the ones that are making all the money. But whichever way, I don't think it's going to cause a lack of spots. I think it'll just, with the transfer portal and everything, it'll just spread things around. So maybe some of the smaller schools will pick up some of the kind of higher level talent that they didn't used to get, that is no longer considered good enough at the, D1 level. So I hope that answered your question. Here we go. I'm looking at this. I'll have to edit this later. Oh, there we go. Okay. What is the single most important thing I can do to jump higher? Is it technical changes or power through weights and plyos? So it really depends. Some guys and gals are just gifted athletes. They're just tall and rangy and fast, and due to a lack of quality coaching, maybe they do have technique flaws, but they can still jump high. That does happen. And that has happened to me where I've looked at someone and said, wow, they're really getting off the ground well. And you got to be careful because you can change things sometimes too radically. And all of a sudden, even though they're doing what you think is the right technique, they're not jumping as high. And that could be comfortability for them. There was a way, like we said, old habits die hard, man. This is just the way that I do this. And so I would say for someone who is not going to improve in technique because either they are rooted in their ways, right? Or whatever, then you have to train them better. You need to get them stronger. You need to get them faster. You need to get them more explosive with plyos. They need joint stability. They need flexibility. They need this. And I believe that's true either way. But it may be more true for someone who either isn't as technically minded or is going to have trouble changing. If you're saying, hey, I want you to get your hands up higher at takeoff, I want you to drive your knee over here, and they start doing those things and they just can't do them. Just can't. It's too hard. It's too this, it's too that, whatever the reasoning is. After a while, it's like banging your head against the wall. It's like, okay, well, let's try what you were doing and let's just make you more explosive, right? So you have that route. And then the other is sometimes you have people that are very technical minded and they do adapt and they do pick up things and they do get better. Sometimes it's maturity. Like we said, some people just mature early. Some guys jump really, really high in high school and like I said, that's it. They're really not going to get any, they kind of matured and hit their peak early. What do you do with them? You try to get them stronger, literally. And I believe I was kind of one of those. Jumped 210 in high school, 6'10" 3/4, went up to the state meet where I thought I was, a big deal and kind of got my butt handed to me by some really good jumpers that I never beat in my whole career, even in college. A little bit humbling, but then, and I, like I said, got to college and I put on 15 pounds. And that first year I jumped 6'8". And I've heard a lot of kids that do that. They hit a height, put on weight, comes down, doesn't go back up again, and they end up walking away from the sport. I threw all my chips into the weight room and, added the power. So I was learning some technique stuff from Del Davis and Lee Balkin, the two jumpers that I worked with at UCLA, two UCLA greats. Shout out to Del and Lee. Um, but I was too heavy, and they both told me you're too heavy. First day, they're like, you're built like a linebacker, and I wasn't, but compared to them, I was a big guy. And so I had to really get after it in the weight room. When I think I might have squatted 220 in high school. But when I got to UCLA after that first year, when I squatted about 240, I didn't really get any better. Like I said, I really doubled down in the weight room and got my full squats up to 400, which wasn't reps. It was a one-time max, but there was a lot of building up to get to that. And, your 3 sets of 3 and 5 sets of 5 were pretty heavy. When I got my squats up like that year when I did that. So after my freshman year was terrible, I lifted that summer and the fall. And early in the fall, we were doing a 5-step drill, and I 5-step 210 again. So then I was like, wow, here we go, almost 2 years later. Well, 1.5 years later from high school, I've got some power back. And then I 5-stepped what it took me to a whole approach to do when I was in high school. And so I was like, okay, this feels pretty good. I got a lot of pop. And so for me, it's kind of turned into a power thing. I had a good coach, Baru Elias at Long Beach City, who was definitely a power guy because he trained Brian Stanton. If you ever saw Brian Stanton jump, good speed and everything, but Brian was powerful. And huge knee drive, beautiful cycling and layout. So envious of Brian. Shout out to Brian Stanton. Brian, if you're out there, get a hold of me, would you? I haven't talked to Brian Stanton in 40 years. Um, so, those things, power versus technique, it really does depend. And that's one of the themes that we talk about here on Raise the Bar, and part of the whole Skyfly and Skyhiandfly Jump Lab. The tenets that I've put up inside of that is that everybody's different. I don't think you can take one style and, either if you find someone who's suited to your style, you're going to look really good coaching them because, man, they do it just the way I did it. And so it's easy for me to do that. It's kind of like, Yoda and Luke, although they were pretty different, right? But you still get to the point of, hey, this is how you do this one move, or, whatever it is when you levitate something. And it's easier. It's always easier for me to deal with double arm jumpers who might be a little bit slower like me and really power up and drive their knee. Like that's right in my wheelhouse. But I have definitely tried to stretch myself these last few years working single armors. A lot of my gals are good single armors. So I'm starting to try to stretch, and realize that everybody's different, and everybody's got different strengths and weaknesses. Everybody matures at different rates, and there's so many variables in high jumping with technique. I want to create one of those almost like a video game where you go through and start it up and say, okay, I want to start off and make myself, create a new look me, or create a high jumper from scratch. Well, what kind do you want to be? Well, I want to be a really fast single armor, okay, or I want to be a slower double arm power guy, or I want to be a kind of a mix of the two, like a Derek Druin who had a big double arm gather, but then kind of turned it into a single arm. And then when I lay out, do I want to pop both my hands towards my hip, like the raise the bar guy here in the background? Or do I want to reach for my heel on the one side? Or, there's so many different ways you can go. And once like me, I've seen, such incredible jumps, but I don't sit there and go, wow, all these people look exactly the same. It's not even close. You watch the Olympic finals just last year, McEwen and Kerr, both double armors. And not super fast enough, but perfect builds. I mean, I don't know how tall McEwen is, but I know Kerr is like 6'7". When they show him running, he doesn't look like he's running that fast, but his strides are so long. I mean, he's really kind of moving. And boy, when he drives that knee up, for me, I put him in power jumper category for sure. I don't look at him and go, oh my gosh, what a great curve. Oh my gosh, this. Oh my gosh, that. I'm just like, he's strong and fast. And he drives his knee up and he rides it up to the top. And sometimes he just goes, and just kind of leans over it and pops his hips up a little bit. And other times he doesn't even do that. He doesn't need to, And I'm like, it's awesome. The jump that McEwen made, the 7-1 opening jump at the Olympic trials, or not the trials, I'm sorry. It was the final. He opened at 7-1 and was a foot over. I mean, knee drive was ridiculously high over for a 7-1 jump. I haven't seen a jump like that at 7-1 since I saw Sotomayor jump right after he broke the world record. And he opened at 7-2 at that meet and kind of did the same thing where I was like, seriously? Like this much air on a 7-2? It looked like a foot that McEwen had on a 7-1 jump. And so, why would you throw your head back and try to arch as hard as you could when you're already over? You're just flying over it in a chair. Why even bother? So, anyway, wandering on the point is there are a lot of variables, a lot of different styles, and there's everybody matures at different rates. How do you get here? How do you get there? So, power for some when you've reached your peak of your abilities technique wise, and maybe you don't have anybody to show you anything else, you know, maybe you just pack on the power. And then, maybe you start watching videos on YouTube, or maybe you go to some coaching clinics, find a clinic. Doug Nordquist does clinics sometimes with, what do they call it? LA 84. That's a free clinic that kind of caters to coaches, but there's no reason why an athlete didn't go. So you look those up. There's different places you can go. Look on the different websites. Go to, USATF even, might have some stuff. Um, you know, but finding the private coach, changing technique as opposed to power, it's really is a toss up. And obviously, I would say instead of one or the other, it'd be nice if you could do both, right? But you do have to have some kind of a technique guru with you if you don't know that, inherently. Every once in a while, you're going to find somebody who can just jump really, really high, and they never had a coach and they don't need one. They just do it. And sometimes those kinds of athletes are become difficult as coaches because they don't understand why you don't know how to do it the way they did it. So they're like, just do it like this, and they'll show you again, even though they're in their 30s. They just jump right over something like, wow. But anyway, so I think we covered that. Let's try one more here. We've got how important is my layout position? I find when I think about my layout, my takeoff suffers, but if I get a good takeoff, sometimes my butt knocks off a bar that my knee is way over. Um, this for me is a huge issue because 9 times out of 10, when I start to deal with an athlete, I will ask them, first off, what do you want me to do for you? Obviously you want to jump higher. Okay. But, in particular, and I'll let them go. I won't tell them about, my 5 different things that I teach: straight, curve, takeoff, flight, layout. Just say, what do you want? What are you looking for? And I cannot tell you how many times I've literally got the phrase, my form sucks. I want to improve my form because it sucks. And I used to think, well, which part? Which part are we talking about? But literally not 9 times out of 10, 99 times out of 10, or 999 out of 1,000, they mean layout position, like this guy behind me. They mean that they're not in that position. Sometimes they'll say, I get in a good position, but I can't hold it, right? And you go, okay. So I know when they say my form sucks that they want a better layout. What they're thinking is layout. They want to get in a better position of going over the bar. Everybody wants to look, really nice. And the funny thing is there's no such thing as aesthetics in the high jump. It's not a judged event. It's not like diving or gymnastics, right? We don't go, hey, you made it and he made it, but man, he sure looked so pretty and easy. And when you hit it, it was going like this. There is none of that, right? Nobody gives you style points. You don't get a 10 from the Russian judge and walk away with the title. It's like, no, you made it. If you made it on your first and I made it on my second, yours was prettier, but I made it on my first and you made it on your second, I win. I don't care how you got over. So it's kind of like an effectiveness deal, right? So what I find is that when everybody's trying to get into this layout position, like this guy behind me, many times they've learned, again, not by doing so much as sometimes it's kind of dangerous. They may have seen the high jump before they tried it. Like back when, I don't even remember watching Fosbury do what he did. And when somebody showed me the high jump, this was 1976, so it hadn't been around that long. Fosbury broke the world record in 68. So the Fosbury technique was 8 years old when I started doing it. And I don't remember, we didn't have the internet. You didn't watch videos. So if there was a news clip or something where I saw somebody jump, I don't even remember if I'd seen Dwight Stones by that time. Maybe 76 was the Montreal Olympics, right? So I might have seen Dwight on TV, but I don't, remember a lot of that. And when I jumped, I didn't have a layout. I sat in a chair. I've got pictures of me sitting, literally knees up, hands up this or down here, whatever, and knees bent, up at perfect 90-degree angles and just knee way up, head way up over the bar, but just barely making it, but I was making bars because I had pop. So it's like, okay, you know, um, when it comes to the, getting over, high jump bars, what is the most important thing? And to me, again, if I get someone who's learned how to lay out, and it's got so many different layers to it. I've had two athletes in the last 7 years, I would say, that trained me into even more of this than I was, and I'm pretty sure I've always been like this. But Malachi Carrasco was one, and Seth Johnson, who's now a decathlete at Cal, was another. Both of them, when they came to work with me, the very first time they left the ground, almost before they left the ground, they were in a perfect layout. I mean, like where you would just go, oh my gosh, that is a thing of beauty, right? Just supernaturally flexible, their head by their heels, nice rainbow arc, right? It looks like a slinky, right? Head to foot, perfect. And the problem with the slinky was that it wasn't horizontal, it was vertical because they were just barely off the ground and they're arching like crazy to get over bars. And these were low bars. And so that's one thing I always talk about is like, you got to be careful because you can get away with some things at low bars that you can't at higher bars. And again, if my strategy is working for me and I can't foresee when it's going to become trouble, that's tough. So again, I would show both Malachi and Seth, I was like, hey, I love the position you're in. I love the move that you're doing to get there. I love all of it. I said, but I need that move to happen later, not sooner. So you can't throw that move while you're still in the midst of your takeoff. We have to run. We have to run a curve. We have to take off. We have to fly for a while. And then we've got to lay out. If you think about it logically, if you take your personal best with your best layout and everything else, let's say you just run and you jump and you get some pretty good air and then you arch like crazy and you pull and the bar is wiggling and it's a new PR and you're like, yeah, I've been training my butt off and I really worked hard and I hit that good position and I held it forever and I pulled and the bar is wiggling, right? And I go, how are we going to jump the next height? And if you think, I had a couple inches there, I could do that again. Okay, how are we going to jump 6 inches higher, right? How am I going to get 6 more inches out of that layout? My prep position or supposition, I don't know which one it is, supposition, it would be that that's not going to happen. Someone who's that bendy, like Seth and Malachi, if you ever watch any of their stuff, you'd be like, you'll see what I'm talking about. You'll go, okay, well that layout, we're maximizing your layout. It's maxed. There's nothing else you're going to get out of that. Okay. But how do I get more height? I'm going to have to run faster. I'm going to have to take farther out. I've got to launch and get more air, what I call getting air, getting a longer flight, and then laying out. I can't start laying out immediately. If my best is 6'6", and eventually I'm going to be jumping at 7'6", let's say it's a foot higher. Can I arch that foot? No, you're not going to be able to arch that foot. You're going to have to run and you're going to have to really master some takeoff mechanics and wait. I don't know how much longer it is. I should figure this out. I need some software on my videos. But if you could figure out, because the video software I have is my iPhone or my iPad, which shows you things in seconds, and I need tenths and hundredths, right? But how much longer does it take a knee to go from 6'6" to just keep riding and go to 7'6"? Whatever that time is, it's a definite difference in time that I need to delay my layout process. Okay. So yeah, which one's more important to me is like, now again, that supposition is kind of a little bit backwards because I'm talking about people that had outrageous layouts. I have worked with people that have outrageously good drive knees and they're in awful positions in the air because the knee is almost too good. Okay. And so if there's a jumper whose knee comes up like crazy, where their knee is like a foot over their hip and their hip is like a couple inches over the bar, you're like, oh my gosh, look at that. That's amazing. And it is. And I think it's awesome. And it's something to be cherished. But at the same time, we do have to get you over the bar. Okay. And if I'm sitting with my knee up and my butt down and I'm kind of looking around at it, I'm only going to make a limited amount of heights before I do have to learn how to get into this position that this guy's in. So that's really the game again. It's kind of like I know I sound like a lawyer or something, or like someone who's what was it Tolkien said about the elves? He said, be careful when you ask the elves for advice because they'll say both yes and no. And I'm saying, well, I don't know which one is more important, but I do know what it's forced me to is I come back to sequencing is more important. It's more important to me that you learn how to run straight, you learn how to accelerate through a curve, you learn how to take a really nice lean angle and lean back angle, get your arms ready for whichever style you're going to use, and boom, nail the takeoff, hit vertical as close as you can get to vertical, and learn how to wait so that you can throw your layout the right time. I do know that if you throw your head back too early, and when I say head back, I mean head back towards the vertical plane of the bar. Picture a big plywood sheet running down the length of the bar. If you break that plane with your head when you're like way out in front of the bar, you throw your head back towards that, you're never going to finish that unless you're just an incredible noodle with incredible, pop. There are some people who get away with it, but again, most of the times I see it, it's they get away with it at lower heights. You're going to be okay at lower heights, even if it's 6'8" and you get away with it. You're not going to get away with it at 7 feet if you're a 6'8" guy. And if you're a 4'10" high jumper, maybe you get away with it at 4'10" and 5 feet, but you don't at 5'2" and 5'4". That's how simple it is. So I need to learn, and you watch some of the great ones, watch Barshim, watch Bondarenko, watch most of those guys will ride the knee. And when I say ride the knee, they drive it up and across, and it's at least hip high. And then they just leave it up. There's a great demonstration video by Stephen Holm where the guy throws the stick at the ground. I'm sure everybody's seen that one. It's done by a Japanese scientist, I think. And they show the strike angle of this stick and it hits the ground and it spins over the bar, right? It says you don't even need a layout. And you see Stephen Holm run up over that image and hits that same angle and pops up. If you watch what he does, he drives his knee back into the curve, which is why I'm convinced, one of many reasons why I'm convinced that's the number one element. And he leaves it up. He just leaves it up. And then at the very top, he leans his head back. So his layout is head back kind of dependent, but he just kind of rolls into it. And I've seen that a lot with single armors. He doesn't really have a pop move like some of the double armors would. So, riding the knee up to the bar and then laying out, my contention is if I can master straight curve, takeoff, and flight, and that flight, that's the only phase. If you want to be better at jumping, that is the phase that needs to get longer. All these other phases need to get shorter. I need to run my straight faster, shorter amount of time. I need to run my curve faster, shorter amount of time. I need to get on and off the ground. As much power and speed and acceleration and force, bam, get off the ground. And even if that is to get longer because of maybe a longer last step and blah, 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 the time difference there is so infinitesimal. But what results is more flight, and the flight is going to be longer and longer and longer as you get better. Now, if I can wait to the same position, body position, right? When do I start my layout? If I can master getting to that position, my contention is that your layout should always be the same. You can throw your head back, your hands back, all of it. I teach, for double armors, they can get their hands on their hips. They can pull their shoulders towards their heels. They can drive the knee down. They can do all kinds of 3-4 different moves. Okay. And we just time them up so that I'm trying to look like that, trying to look like that little arch, like McDonald's arch, if you want to call it that, or a rainbow or a slinky, right? But the key is that your head and your feet are on the same level. Most people, when they do their slinky, they're like a big C, like this. And I don't want to be a C. I want to be one of these, okay, like golden arch. If I can wait and get into that position, as soon as your head goes lower than your feet, man, it's just like a slinky. The slinky just flips over, goes down to the next step. or walks uphill. Either whichever way you want to do it. I always feel going downhill, but that is all. The key is sequencing. It's not necessarily the layout position. And one of my least favorite things by what I think are well-meaning but unexperienced coaches is when they'll tell their athlete, "Oh, if you could just hold that position longer," you know. And what does that usually mean? It usually means that they did it too early and throwing their head back. And you would think when you throw your head back earlier that you will spin more, you'll rotate more. Completely wrong. It has the opposite effect. Okay. You won't spin any faster. You'll spin slower because you cut off your knee drive early. You're driving parts of your body back underneath the bar and it's got to spin all the way around now. There are some very few jumpers that get away with it, but I would still contend that they would jump higher if they were to leave their knees up longer. Ivanyuk is one from the Soviet Union. He's only 5'10" or 11, and maybe he just can't ride his knee that high, and he really needs to get into a position. But he ends up in that position, but not by riding his knee there. And then the young jumper from Georgia, Elena Kulichenko, she even told us on the podcast, she says she thinks she needs to ride her knee higher so she can start getting heights above 2 meters. And her layout is so pretty that she just pops her knee almost immediately at takeoff and gets into a nice position and makes a lot of bars. But like I said, she is, I think, coming to the realization that there's only so much there with the layout. And her layout, I mean, if you saw it, you would be like, oh my God. It's like I say, it's like, oh my gosh, look at that. I'm here to tell you that when people saw me lay out, it was not like, oh my gosh, look at that guy. He's so flexible. He's just that. They would be like, did you see how high he drove his knee up? That was usually what got me over bars. It was not my beautiful layout. So I might be prejudiced that way, but I would love to have had one of those and to have used it at the right time. So again, sequence is what I preach. I want, and I've got a ton of drills, pit drills and backovers, and you can see them all over the internet. You see them all over YouTube. You can see them all over Instagram. Former jumpers, new jumpers now, former coaches, new coaches now, showing all their best tricks and how do I get into this position, blah, blah, blah. And there's tons of great drills out there, and I do a lot of them, and I steal from others, and I've created some of my own, and I hope they steal from me. When you look at it, it's like I'm all about it. I'm all about getting you into that position because yes, it is very efficient. It gets you over the bar. And like many people have said, the beauty of the Fosbury is that the center of mass of most jumpers is actually lower than the bars that they clear. Okay, because of this layout position. So if you look at this guy here, his legs are down under, right? If your head and your feet are down below the bar while your hips are up above it, the center of mass can be down lower than the bar. So it's very efficient, but it needs to be done at the right time. Okay. When you throw your head back and you're going towards the bar, I think it's a mistake. I think we need to go up. We need to start to fall across. And then once your head has broken through that vertical plane, now you can picture another plane going horizontally. You see this guy here, he's pulling his shoulders down towards his heels because he's already past the plane of the bar. That's the way we get there. If we started it too early, yes, you can get away with it. I just don't think it's going to be consistently gotten away with. You can occasionally. Superhuman efforts and adrenaline are amazing things, and you can make a jump you never made before. When I watch Mahuchich, the 6'10" jump, I think she's too close to the bar. I think she ditches her knee drive early, and she kicks her leg out and then swings back into a layout simply because she's too close. Her brain knows she's too close and finished it for her. But I'm like, when you look at what she's doing, the knee drive up and across is like, oh, mwah. The running, the straight, the curve are fantastic. The only reason she can't ride her knee up is she was a little too close on the 6'10" and 3/4 jump. Now, if she had been an inch or two, that's the tiny bit of amount we have to change, an inch or two farther out, she would have been able to leave that knee up a tenth of a second, 5/100ths of a second, I don't know, but longer. And what does that do? That gets me a little more air. And I don't have to throw my head back. I don't have to ditch my knee early. I can just let them ride. I think Mahuchich could jump 7 feet. I think she's got that in her. But if she's too close to the bar, she's going to struggle to jump any higher than 210. It's just difficult. I've had some really good jumpers come to me, and when they're bar crowders, I call them, it puts too much stress on you. It's very difficult to hit vertical as you're running really fast and close to the bar. You need some space. If you don't hit purely vertical where you're coming up one just perfect 90-degree angle to the ground, if you're tilted towards the bar just a little bit, guess what? You're going to get to the bar quicker. It makes sense, right? So what do I do? If I've got somebody who's doing that and I say, man, you are straight. Your body lines are perfect. Legs straight, arms are up, knees across, but we're just tilted over a little bit, right? Instead of here, we're over here. What do I do with that guy? Slide him out just a little. Just 2 inches can be a huge difference. Okay. But one thing about those people that are bar crowders now, they might drop their knee early, but they learn how to get it across. Because if you don't drive your knee back in the curve, you just eat the bar. You're right on top of it anyway. So if you're right there and you don't hit vertical, you're just going to bink. You go right across or right under it. So I have actually started adapting my thinking on that. I used to just move everybody out and say, yeah, you got to be farther out. And some people start diving because they don't think they can go up first and get over there. So you have to be careful. Sometimes I'll put the bar, at low heights first, but keep moving them forward, which is kind of weird, but it really does force you to pop your knee inside. Well, hey, that's we're gonna cut it short here. That was a good ramble. We had some good questions there in our first ever mailbag. If you would like your questions answered, by the Skyhiandfly guy, please send them in. Again, you can DM me on Instagram. I have both the Skyhiandfly Jump Lab and the Skyhiandfly guy. Either one of those, be happy to get those. And you can try the email, like I said. It's skyhiandfly@gmail.com. Send those in, and we'll get after it and have another mailbag soon. Again, shouting out to all my athletes all across the divisions of CIF. Big week coming up, the CIF prelims, which is a weird big day. There's generally anywhere from 40 to 30. Division 3 only had 25 guys at this level, but they're going to cut from 25 down to 9 is the way that it usually works for the final. And then from those 4 groups of 9, so there's Division 1, 2, 3, and 4 from D1, just like D1 and the NC2A is the biggest. D4 would be like small schools or like NAIA comparatively. So D1, 2, 3, and 4, you have your 9, however that all shakes out once they go to finals, but they'll take the top 18. The first 4, 1 from each level, I think. Don't quote me yet. I'm still not sure. I got to check with CIF office. I tried to call him today, but I called him too late. All right. Until next time, keep joining us again. Hit the subscribe button if you haven't done so before. We're here on YouTube with the video part. And then we're also on most platforms, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and so on. So, you can find it for when you're driving to work. And, who has time to watch an hour-long podcast, on YouTube? But I listen to them when I'm driving to work. So if that's your gig, then, do the Apple podcast. Give us a like on YouTube, Apple, or Spotify, and also do the same on the Instagram site. And that'll do it for us here. I'm Troy Haynes, the Skyhiandfly guy. This has been Raise the Bar, our first mailbag ever. And we're looking forward to doing one of those. Like to do one, maybe try to get on a once a week kind of schedule. All right. You guys have a good one. We'll talk soon.